Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Talking City podcast. I'm Tyrone Marshall in the host's chair today, joined by Simon Bajkowski once again. Si, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Ty. How are you?
Yes, good. I've just been telling you I've got a little bit of a cold. It's our Christmas do tonight, and I've managed to get a cold before the Christmas do, which is always disappointing. So
Super spreaded.
So that's it. I'm going to super spread it to all my colleagues tonight. And if you see any of us at the Etihad on Sunday, there'll be 4 of us there. Don't come near us because we'll all be coughing and spluttering. It'll all be my fault. But I'm already dreading that feeling of waking up tomorrow morning with a hangover, a mouth like the Sahara, a blocked nose. Maybe it's age, but the prospect of drinking is in the balance at the moment with that thought of what it's going to feel like in the morning with a cold and a hangover. But I'm sure when I wake up with a cold and inevitable hangover this morning, I'll tomorrow morning rather. I didn't this morning. Tomorrow morning, I'll regret it. But there we go. It's Christmas. It's got to be done. And let's get on to business with this podcast as well. Then it's another downbeat Manchester City podcast, of which there have been an awful lot of late. Juventus in the week. Juventus 2, Manchester City 0. I mean, it's the obvious place to start, and I guess the easy introduction is: are we Team Ilkay or Team Pep here? What did we make of that performance?
It felt like Team Ilkay was the private version, and Team Pep was the sort of
Team Ilkay said what they were meant to say in private in public, didn't they? I think.
Yes, Team Ilkay. I mean, the look on Pep's face when he was told what Ilkay had said and was like, he said that. It felt more like, well, I've been telling them that, but I didn't expect him to say it here rather than sort of a complete disagreement. But yeah, I mean, it sums up well where City are at. You know, the left hand may know what the right hand is doing at times, other times it doesn't. And even if they do, getting them to join up isn't as easy as it was. It was a sort of promising first half and a disastrous second half, which you can see why Pep said they played well for large parts of it, but they were toothless in attack, they were absent in midfield, and they were atrocious in defence. So it doesn't really add up to a successful football team.
No. I mean, how much should we be reading into Pep saying in publicly they played well? Because he seems to have been saying it a lot during this 10-game run. And, you know, I know he's saying messages for the players as much as for us at times, maybe. But, I mean, they had a bit of control in the first half, I guess. They created one good chance for Haaland. But when you compare it to the City of old, and maybe that's the mistake we're making, not even the City of old, the City of 6 months ago, essentially, it wasn't a good performance, was it? Do you feel like a lot of these public pronouncements, he's maybe offering a slightly different take in private because he can't be seeing a lot of these performances at the moment and genuinely being particularly happy with them?
I think the problem is, how do you solve it? You know, like Ilkay said, like if the players lose a duel, their heads go down instantly. And if anything goes wrong, they're not able to come back. I think he put it really well. Like they're always making the wrong decisions in the critical moments, and so that allows them to play pretty well for like 70, 80, 85, 88 minutes of the game. But if the 2 minutes where you don't play well, you let in 2 goals, then it's not a good performance. But you know, I don't know how much that can be coached. I don't know how much Guardiola can change that. You know, obviously can try and work with psychologists and you know, improve the mentality. But it's just like a bunch of players who they can't feel their legs anymore because they've run that much, and sort of the confidence is through the floor as well. So picking it up is taking a lot of time and effort, and there's no immediate sort of solution or way out of the situation that they're in.
No, and I mean, in a way, they've got a similar-ish problem to United, maybe for different reasons. And we'll obviously come on to the derby in the second half, but you know, it's noticeable when I've done United this season that when they make a mistake, heads just go for 10 minutes. Like they're completely gone. And you saw it for anyone who watched them against Forest on Saturday. and Arne made that mistake for the goal. And then for 10 minutes, they played so badly. They were lucky to only concede one more in that period. They can't make a mistake and forget about it. And we're kind of seeing that for different reasons with City, aren't we? That they're playing well at times in games. They are exerting some control. They look okay. We certainly saw it more at the start of this run. But then as soon as something goes against them, whether it's an individual error or just a goal, it's taken them too long to kind of clear their heads, isn't it? And I guess that does come back to what you were saying, that it's maybe a confidence thing with City.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, yeah, I'm writing something on Edison ahead of the weekend because it could be his 350th appearance for the club, but it could not. And you sort of look at that first goal that Juventus scored, and you sort of think Edison's done really well to block the initial shot, and then Gvardiol kind of passes it to no one. Walker should maybe be more aware. No one stops the second ball coming in, and Edison has a sort of header from 4 or 5 yards. There's a powerful header, and he does quite well, but he sort of doesn't stop it going into the net. And other keepers, you could say, would have saved it. And it that kind of sums up where City are at. They're doing sort of plenty well, but error after error after error just means that no one comes out of it looking good, and no one is coming out of it looking good because it's a collective failure as much as it's many individual failures.
Yeah, and we've spoken a lot about the kind of the age of the midfield, the legs going, Haaland suddenly missing chances and not being at his sharpest, but it is just a shambles at the back, isn't it? And that is a major issue for them. And you saw it. I mean, you saw it with both goals. Really, both goals were just so soft. The first one, you said Edison did well there to block the initial shot, which he did. It was pretty well hit. I wonder if you could argue that maybe you'd want to get it away from goal rather than straight back into the danger area. That maybe it's a poor clearance from Gvardiol, but it's a panicky clearance from Gvardiol. And then, like you say, he kind of does the hard bit in saving the header and somehow lets it creep over the line. But all too often, these goals are just coming for all their other issues. And I know we'll get onto the defence and who can possibly play there at the weekend in the second half. But defensively, they're just a shambles at the moment. And that's kind of come away from where they were. Certainly the treble season, it was built on that defence in a way, wasn't it? And I think Haaland scoring the goals, but the defence was the biggest improvement to the treble season, I think, in terms of the security that Guardiola found. And it's gone.
And that's it. I mean, you can debate whether Edison should have saved a header from 4 yards out, whether that was good or not. What is not up for debate is it good defending to allow a free header from 4 yards out, and it's not. And a lot of it is defensive injuries and sort of the respective tiredness of those that have played, physical and mental. But also, the City have always had success as a team, and the midfield is just not working this season, and nothing they do can help it. And the age of the legs in midfield and the tiredness in the legs in midfield is just not conducive to again, Gundogan said it is like, this is not what this team is built for, to be chasing back 50 meters, but they can't keep the ball and they can't progress the ball, and so they're having to do it and just giving up so many chances so easily. I think the last 10 games they've won 1, lost 7, and conceded 23. 23 goals in 10 games is atrocious. City would sort of, in previous seasons, would go 38 league games and only concede 35 goals, but they're just shipping really good chances every game. So a City clean sheet is just unheard of, really.
Yeah, and it's not like that 10-game run has been massively taxing in terms of the teams they've played. I mean, who's in there? Palace, Forest was a clean sheet, of course. Brighton, Sporting, Bournemouth, Feyenoord. There's been some difficult games in there, but there's been some games you would expect them to win and win with keeping a clean sheet as well. And I mean, when Gundogan lays it out as clearly as he does, and you've just explained the problems there, it does make you wonder how it's going to change, because there is no quick fix to that. And when you listen to Gundogan talk, I mean, you could almost play the second goal over his comments, because it felt like that was kind of what he was getting at. And you see McKennie streak clear and Juventus win the ball, and City are just nowhere. That midfield is absolutely nowhere. Defensively, they can't cope with the runners. And yes, Juve picked it up in a decent position, but don't lose the ball in that position. And then, I mean, McKennie just runs away from that midfield. It is frightening how fast he goes away from them. And it felt like essentially what Gundogan was getting at is that second goal, we cannot do that. If we keep giving the ball away in those areas, this is going to happen game after game, week after week, because we cannot run back. And it feels like that second goal was the perfect example, really.
It was also noted, it was Weah to McKennie for the goal. Like, Juve had substitutes who came on and changed the game. City had absolutely nothing, and it's a problem. Like, the starting 11 aren't doing it, and they've not got the substitutes to do that. We come back to sort of, should Pep be playing more youngsters like McAtee and things, and that is its own issue. And I think the basic answer is yes, but it wouldn't necessarily change much, or you couldn't be certain it would change much. But like, City they don't have the starting 11 to win games, and they don't have the bench to change games at the minute, so they are just stuck in this vicious cycle where they're not able to win football matches, which is very strange and completely unusual for the City that everyone's used to seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in terms of positives, De Bruyne, I guess, was a positive. I mean, there's not loads to talk about, but
No.
he did look a little bit sharper. And if City to improve in the final third, and like you say, the way they're playing at the moment, they need to score 3 goals to win a game. And if they're going to get 3 goals every game, it feels like De Bruyne is going to have to be at his best. And that was more encouraging on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I mean, my match piece from the game was what a negative it was that De Bruyne was good. But that's more from sort of a contractual point of view, because, like, again, City don't want to be so reliant on De Bruyne at this stage, with him 33 and missing large chunks of the season. But it really was striking. Like, just, I mean, we've known for years and years he's on a different level than everyone else. But I mean, if you're anyone else at that football club whose job it is to create and score goals, you should be, a little disappointed that De Bruyne is still streets ahead of you. Because whenever anyone else got the ball, there was just no chance. The regression from Foden this year has been alarming with all his injuries, but Savinho started well and then has flattered to deceive. Doku looks good, but still has no end product too often. Grealish the same. I don't think Grealish scored in 2024 for City, which is just astonishing, really. I know he's not in the team for goals and assists, blah, 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 but, you still need to be contributing, and he isn't. So it's kind of De Bruyne or bust. Haaland, had one chance that was all right. Could have gone in on another day. I don't think it was a bad miss, but it was a miss still. And Haaland, I looked, has actually played more minutes than anyone else in the squad, which is, a triumph for the medical team that he's done that, but also, a worry, because you don't want him to be playing so often, because they'll look tired in games, and he is looking tired in games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's an astonishing stat about Grealish. It kind of sums up, doesn't it? Those attacking players, just beyond Haaland, are just not scoring enough goals, and that is something that's got to change. The Champions League in general, then 2 games to go. City are 22nd, which seems incredible to say, really. I think the top 8 has gone now. I think City would snap your hand off for a 2-legged playoff in February as we speak. PSG away and Club Brugge at home to come in the final 2 games. I mean, Are they going to get top 24? Are they going to stumble through? It's surely they will. I guess the concern is that it's PSG away next, who are actually below City and are outside the qualification places at the moment. And if City were to lose that game, then they would go into the final match day probably outside the top 24. And that would be a really nervy, horrible affair against Club Brugge. I mean, it's about 6 weeks away, I think, so things could have changed by then. But they've put themselves in a position they really don't want to be in, haven't they?
Yeah, horrendous. You'd still back them to make the top 24 of the Champions League, and what an extraordinary thing that is to say. But you won't put any money on it at this point. PSG away is always tricky. And with the form and the state of the squad that City are in, Club Brugge at home will be always tricky. Now, both of those games are in January. Will City sign the players in January that means they have a bit more strength and a bit more confidence going into those games, and that enables them to get the result? Like, it should be a real alarm bells around the club that they're in danger of missing out on the Champions League knockout phase. You're talking about something that's not happened for 10 years. So it's, 12 years it'll be. So it's a huge, huge worry. Because, Real Madrid are in a similar position, PSG are in a similar position. You kind of back Madrid to get out of it. I'm not sure City, there is as much faith, just because there's no end in sight to this kind of cycle of performances and results that they are in. But it's really sort of mind-blowing for everyone, I think, that City could be the first team, I think, to qualify for this Club World Cup at the end of the season, could go to the Club World Cup having blown their chances of having not played in Europe for 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, lots could change between now and those final 2 group games. Lots could change before the playoff if they get there in February. But even just looking at the table at the moment, I mean, if they stumble through, then 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th at the moment are Dortmund, Bayern, Atletico Madrid and AC Milan. I mean, Atlanta and Juventus are 13th and 14th. If they end up playing one of those teams on current form, you wouldn't back them to win a 2-legged playoff. And like I said, that's February. It's a couple of months away. Maybe things will change. Maybe they'll sort it out in January. But it's very hard to make a case for City going deep in this competition at the moment. And the focus has to be on just surviving in it for now, which is an incredible thing to say. Right, that's all for part 1. We'll be back after the break to look ahead to the derby. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. There's a view then that this weekend the derby has probably come at a terrible time for City, but I think you can make the opposite argument. What better way to lift a club that's in a 10-game crisis than to play a club that's in a 10-year crisis? That'll surely make City feel better about themselves. I mean, what are we expecting from this weekend?
Well, I mean, that's it. I keep looking and thinking, surely United will be catching City in the table soon, and no danger of that. And Saturday 2-2 draw at Palace, and you think, oh, maybe that leaves the door open, and then United contrive to lose at home to Nottingham Forest, and then sack the sporting director the next morning, and sort of it was pretty messy against Victoria Pilsen on Thursday night. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, I don't think City will play many worse teams United this season with the state that they are in, but at the same time, much better City teams have lost to United teams in a similar state of crisis. So there's very little confidence, I think, for either team going into the game.
Yeah, I mean, when United were 1-0 down last night, it was a real sort of message to City, hold my beer moment, wasn't it? That they were potentially losing away to Pilsen. Obviously, they turned it round, but unconvincing against a team who've got Mate Vidra as their star striker. And I mean, in terms of City's selection then, I mean, one of the issues, and you mentioned negatives about De Bruyne there. I mean, one of the negatives has to be that he started 3 games in a row. I think Ruben Diaz has started 4 games in a row after coming back from injury. These are decisions that, with a fully fit squad and a team that was ticking, Guardiola would just not be making. He wouldn't be playing these players at that kind of level straight back after an injury, because it's not what he does. He protects the players' fitness. He keeps them in and out when they're first back in. He's been forced into decisions he doesn't want to make. And I think we'd both expect almost a certain, well, Diaz has to start. De Bruyne probably has to start, but they're kind of being pushed back into the red zone, aren't they? Well, not only at risk of injury, but at risk of fatigue as well. And it kind of sums up the dilemmas that Guardiola's got at the moment in terms of team selection.
Yeah, and that has been sort of the problem with so many injuries, is that players come back and they're not fully fit, and they then are more at risk of picking up injuries, and they're also not at their peak performance. You know, Kyle Walker has been horrendous this season, but you know, by all accounts, has been playing not at 100% for pretty much the whole of it. Obviously, the sort of racist abuse he suffered yesterday was absolutely atrocious as well, and he's right to call a lot of people out on it. But you know, in an ideal world, Kyle Walker won't be anywhere near the starting lineup for Sunday. But City have 4 slots for defenders, and they only have 3 available, and Walker is one of them. So Walker has to play whether you want him to or not. Diaz has to play whether you want him to or not. Gvardiol has to play, with so many errors in recent weeks, whether you want him to or not, because there is nobody else, unless you know, they're going to have to throw somebody in for the derby who isn't expecting to play that defense, whether that's a kid like Simpson Pussy or somebody else, or, you know, I don't know, add it to Bernardo Silva. But, you know, like you mentioned Diaz and De Bruyne, I think Silva and Gundogan have started the last 6. Like, that's not ideal on them and on a midfield that needs to be anything but tired. So just problems all over the pitch. And Lewis's suspension, well, I guess not in amazing form, but just adds to the list for Guardiola. It's not a pretty sight.
No, we're recording this before his press conference, so maybe there'll be some good news defensively. But to put you on the spot beforehand, who do you think plays in defence, and who gets the last defensive slot, and who plays in goal? I mean, it was notable that Foden and Kovacic were both on the bench in midweek without coming on, which kind of suggests they are at least close. Obviously, there's a possibility that he's kept a defender back, knowing they'd be desperately needed on Sunday. But at the moment, I mean, are we looking at maybe Simpson Pussy, or does he try and get creative? But if so, how? Because there's just not the players there, is there? And you mentioned the Edison piece you're writing. Does he keep his place, or are we expecting Ortega back in?
I mean, it's very difficult to say. It's a sort of a gross simplification of both keepers, but it feels like if you play Edison if you want to be on the front foot, and you play Stefan Ortega if you're expecting to get battered with shots. So, you know, before the second half against Juventus, Edison playing was a big positive, and like Juventus weren't bothering to press him when he had the ball, because they knew there was little point, and they didn't want to risk doing that and leaving him to expose them in behind. So, like, it is, I always think playing as Edison is a positive move, but City are not in a positive place right now. I kind of think defensively you have to go with Simpson Pussy. I just don't know who else there is. You know, you could play Bernardo at left back possibly, and then bring Foden into the middle, but it's not ideal. And you know, the one place United are sort of pretty well stocked is right wing generally. So you want someone decent. Or someone decent defensively there. Yeah, there are so many selection issues. Just to say there are so few players to choose from, which is quite something.
Yeah, I mean, Foden and Kovacic, do we think they might come back in? And if they do, I mean, I know he didn't play, but let's talk a bit about it. He's kind of, after a slow start in derbies, he's owned them the last few years. But he's coming into this one in a very different place, isn't he? And this has been a really difficult run for him. I think 3 goals and 2 assists this season. And I mean, it feels like it would make a massive, massive difference to this team if he stepped it up, because he has got several levels still to get to this season, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think Foden has more chance of coming back into the team because he's just been out for a short while with illness. But it's one of those things where it's just, if it's not one thing, it's another with Foden. And every time he comes back, he needs rhythm again, and he's not at his best. And he's not been 100% all season in terms of the level he was at last year. Kovacic, I think, would struggle to come back because he's been out for so long. So Foden's more likely to play, but Foden is your match winner, and that was the problem. City shouldn't have missed De Bruyne so much while he was out for 2 months, but Foden had his own issues and wasn't able to, fill the De Bruyne gap that he was able to last season. And then, the other player that did that, Julian Alvarez, is scoring goals for fun at Atletico instead. So, City just haven't. They've missed a lot of players from injury, but the players that haven't been missing through injury haven't done enough either, and have got progressively worse as they've been played, or they've picked up their own injury problems. So it's a big day for Foden. How Guardiola would love Foden to pull something out of the bag like he did in the last derby, but it's just very hard to see it happening.
Yeah, the second time in 6 weeks as well that Guardiola has come up against Ruben Amorim. This is probably going to be a very different game, isn't it? At Sporting, Amorim had players who could run. At United, he's made it pretty clear that he has players who can't run, which kind of takes away one of his key weapons, and something that City obviously hate at the moment in terms of players swarming all over them. But it still feels, kind of outlined United's problems earlier. I mean, it feels the hardest derby to predict. That maybe I can remember since I've been at the MEN. I mean, I've got literally no idea. I think you can make an argument for all 3 outcomes on Sunday, and a pretty strong argument. It feels very, very different, and I'm not sure anyone can even agree on who should be aiming for what result, who should be favourites. I mean, it just feels like we've got no idea what is going to happen. I mean, have you got the slightest idea what's going to happen, and who? I mean, what's a good result for City here? Have they got to be aiming for a win, or is a draw? Would a draw be considered a decent result, all things told?
I think we can safely say it is all set to be sort of the lowest quality derby.
Yeah.
For, I would say that one in COVID, I think it was November 2020, when City were absolutely abysmal and played out a 0-0 draw against a bang average United team. Ended up finishing top 2, both of the teams that season, which I think says more about the standard of that season rather than anything else. I know City came back and were amazing, very effective in the second half of the season, but it wasn't astonishing, the level of football. And yeah, City have to aim for a win. Like they're struggling so much on the road that they really have to take advantage of the home games. They did it in midweek last week against Forest, the Feyenoord. I think that's why the Feyenoord game cut so badly, because and the Spurs game, because the first 4 defeats of the run were away from home, and Spurs were kind of being Spursy as they've continued to be. I don't think they've won a game since they won 4-0 at City. So it was a load of different things that have come together. But if the home form's included in that as well, City really are struggling. They have to be aiming for a win, and they should get a win because they are a better team than United still. And kind of any new bounce from Ruben Amorim just hasn't really happened. And sort of, someone asked me this week, what can United take from Amorim beating City with Sporting? And other than a first-hand look at how easy it is City teams collapse at the minute, there's not much. And the other side is everyone can see where the problems are for City. That's why every manager going is exploiting it. So United know where they can have the advantages against City, but you'd still expect City to come out on top in the end.
Yeah, confidently predicted there. Away from the game then, a couple of other bits that we've not touched on since the last podcast. First of all, the Club World Cup draw has been made. City in a group with Wydad, Al An, and Juventus. So that's a thing. Si, what do we make of what do we make of that draw? Another game against Juve.
Yeah, and a game against the team from Abu Dhabi, playing for the pride of Abu Dhabi in the tournament. It is, yeah. I was a bit surprised because, I mean, first off, I was expecting City to get into Miami in the first game. I was expecting Messi versus Pep in the sort of, completely non-fixed way that FIFA were going about this. So I was surprised when they weren't drawn with into Miami, and then it was like, who have they been drawn with? It feels very Club World Cup, and all the groups feel like non-events, to be honest. And also, I kind of expected that groups would be all in one place. Maybe that was naive on my part, but so you've got 3 group games, and they're all in completely different US cities, hundreds of miles from each other, which is nice. And yeah, it's still difficult to get excited about the Club World Cup, but it's one of those things where I still think City will be targeting the Club World Cup, and maybe even more, especially now. There's this kind of debate as to whether City are finished and over and need a completely new squad, which some subscribe to. I don't really. They obviously need new players, but I agree with Guardiola that this team, with everyone fit, would be challenging for everything. And I completely see a scenario where they go to the Club World Cup with everyone fit and absolutely boss it. They just might have been in a sort of struggle to get fourth and not in the Champions League knockouts before it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to be at the risk of alienating large portions of the world, I think City in current form would still beat Wydad and Al An. But yes, maybe enthusiasm for the Club World Cup will grow once it arrives. It's certainly going to be an interesting tournament, and it will be prestigious to win. And you can guarantee that the last 8, at least, will be exciting, mostly because it will be 6, 7, maybe 8 European teams, and it'll be like another Champions League essentially. But that's the draw done, and I think it's going to be very much at the back of City's minds now, given the issues they have in front of them. But there is some good news on the horizon. Yes, you heard that right. Some good news. I hope you haven't tuned out yet. City are rich. Just posted their annual report. Some good figures in there. £715 million in revenue, record revenue for the second year in a row. £78 million in profit. It's looking good for that January spending splurge, Si.
I think that's the thing. I'm sure fans who've been critical of the fact that City haven't spent enough on the squad won't be delighted to see the club be like, here are our record money, and here's all the money that we've made and not spent on reinvesting the squad. Happy Derby week. It's one of those things where, I mean, show me a set of financial results and reports that are interesting. It's not that interesting, but it's kind of significant that they've made even more money despite not winning the treble, and not the performance was worse, but they've still managed to make more money, which would suggest that sort of the treble was not like the one-off thing that can never be achieved again, but that the club is still growing. And I saw in the report the sort of like membership of City supporters is up like 61% in the US and similar in China, and they're really booming around the world and taking advantage of that. I suppose the other point to make is that it is pretty, the results are stable, and stable in itself may not be exciting, but if you compare it to a few miles down the road where 25% of staff are being made redundant and Christmas dinners are being cancelled and bonuses are being turned into M&S vouchers, while £200 million is spent on players that are deemed good enough for a manager who's not deemed good enough for United, and they have to sack him and bring someone else in, and then they pay Newcastle millions of pounds to bring in a sporting director who they sack after 5 months. So it's kind of like, City's financial report puts them in very good health. And while, you know, it might not be that sexy of its own accord, it is there is a sexiness to stability when you see what is around it. That's what I tell my wife.
That's a line you've used before, Si. I can tell the way that rolled out. Your eyes lit up then. You've definitely used that one before. Yes, very nicely put. And I think that's a sexiness instability is a perfect way to end this podcast. And I'm just going to go and alter the title before it goes live. So fantastic. Si, thank you for your time, and I'll see you on Sunday.
Thank you. See you then.
Remember to like us and subscribe and all the usual stuff. Leave us a review if you've enjoyed today. We'll be back hopefully on Monday to dissect the derby and whatever may have happened at the Etihad on Sunday. But for now, thanks for tuning in, and speak to you all soon.